coming to our first informational session for our Minnesota EV Smart program. We're happy to have you here today, and today's focus is about hosting EV ride and drive events. We're kind of getting into that season where you might be planning one for later this summer or in the fall, and so we thought that this was a timely session to have as you may be planning these events for your community. So in the chat, we have a question for you, and it's, has your community hosted an informational event that included EVs? If so, what was it? So if you would just throw that into the chat, it doesn't have to be a ride and drive event. It could be some other type of event that just included EVs. And also, as you're doing that, you know how we all have our little Zoom names? If you could rename yourself to also include community you're representing today, so that other people on the call will know where you're coming from. That would be great. And in the meantime, I'll introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Rebecca Heisel, and I am a program coordinator at the Great Plains Institute, helping to run this program. So it looks like there's quite a few on that haven't hosted an event yet, which is great. Hopefully this webinar will inspire you to maybe dip your toe into that pond. But otherwise, we are getting a few answers that there's been some showcases, which is great to see as well. So keep throwing those responses in the chat and renaming yourself to include the city that you're representing. So our agenda here today is that we have some colleagues from GPI on to give an overview of ride and drive best practices, as well as dealership outreach, since that's a big part of hosting events like this. Then we have some great representatives from cities who agreed to come on as a panel to give their personal experiences hosting different EV events. And then followed by that, we will have a group Q&A for our speakers as well as our panelists. So throughout this event, as you might come up with questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Otherwise, we will have time to ask those at the end of the session. So without further ado, I will announce my colleagues Hannah Haas and Moazuddin from the Great Plains Institute. They have done a lot of great work surrounding ride and drives and organizing them, so we're really happy to have them to give us an overview of best practices and dealership outreach advice.
Thank you, Rebecca. Happy to be here. I'm Hannah Haas. I am the research and writing specialist for the transportation and fuels team at GPI. And in previous role, I was the meeting and event coordinator. So I spent 2.5 years planning events like ride and drives for Drive Electric Minnesota. So I'm happy to be here and talk about the things that I have learned in putting on these events. So for those of you who may not be familiar, Drive Electric Minnesota is an initiative that is facilitated by the Great Plains Institute. And we just help a bunch of automakers, auto dealers, utilities, any EV champion kind of further along EV charging infrastructure, education, any sort of thing related to EVs. And as part of our outreach, we partner with our member organizations to put on ride and drives. And so next slide, please. Ride and drives are a type of event with vehicles available for test drive. It is usually a mixture of plug-in and hybrid, plug-in hybrid and straight up EV fully electric vehicles. Usually some sort of static display of electric vehicles and a presentation. And we've been putting these on for a couple of years now, and so have developed a checklist of best practices, which is what we'll walk through today. And the checklist includes event information, materials needed for successful events, and then things to do before, during, and after. And I'll just do kind of like pull out the most important things for you and not go through every single step in the checklist. But next slide, please. So we do have the checklist broken into 3 different columns. The first one is kind of your item, the second one is the notes, and then the third is the person responsible. The notes is where all of most of the meat of the ride and drive is going to be located, and it's going to include best practices or a variety of ways that you can address the particular item. And then the person responsible column is for you as the organization to just kind of assign out tasks as necessary. And then the toolkit also, or checklist, also includes sample literature. So things like sample surveys, waivers, social media toolkit to market your events. The surveys there's 2 of them. There's a pre and post test drive survey. So if you want to track attitudes towards EVs over the course of your events, there are surveys that can help you already made and ready to go within this checklist. Next slide, please. And so before the event, you obviously want to go through your who, what, when, and where to just kind of figure out a little bit more about how you want to structure your event. So asking, who is your audience? Are they familiar with EVs? Are they brand new? Will they need a 101? Or can you kind of give them a little bit more detailed in the weeds information? Or are you going to try to hit all of those? Are you going to try to make sure that there's a little bit of for everyone at your event? And then also what does it look like? Will it have a speaker and a panel? Will you offer food? Will there be a static display or partner booths? Think about the timing is also really important by way of not only making sure that your audience, your target audience is available to be at your event, but also by way of vehicle availability for test drives. And that's something that my colleague Moaz will get into a little bit later. But we have found that midweek events tend to work better than the weekends. And then when you're planning an event, especially during the times of year of like Earth Day or National Drive Electric Week, which is usually the last week in September, there's going to be less vehicles because there are so many other events that you will be running into potentially some competition for vehicles. And so we suggest maybe doing it staggering a little bit. So maybe not the last week of September, but maybe the first week of October or sometime in September, so you can still capitalize on the awareness that's going on around National Drive Electric Week, but you're not trying to compete with other events for your vehicles. And then where your site should be a large outdoor space where a lot of vehicles can be displayed. You have a lot of room for booths and partners. And then it should be someplace where you have a number of test driving routes available. We do strongly encourage having a variety of test drives available and then a decision made later on in the process. But at the very beginning, making sure that you've got a number of test drive routes that you could choose from. And it is also very helpful to have charging stations on site as well, just in case your vehicle or someone's vehicle needs to be charged before it goes back to the dealership, or it needs to charge halfway through the event just to make sure that it has enough juice to do what you want it to do. And next slide, please. Once you have all of that, you can get into the nitty-gritty of planning your event layout. And so deciding locations for test drives, which is ideally near the chargers, where your registration table is going to be, your partner booths, your static display. We really strongly encourage limiting foot traffic crossing the test drive route, just to minimize any sort of pinch point or liability. Just try to not have any traffic crossing the test drive route. And so that's one of the many things that you should consider when planning your test drive route. We recommend about 5 minutes for test drive for a total of 10 to 12 minutes per test drive. So that takes into account the time that the driver is actually driving the vehicle, but also getting in and out, asking questions of the dealer, any of that other question and answer that goes with getting into the car, adjusting the rearview mirror, making sure that the seat's where it needs to be. We also recommend using right-hand turns only. That just limits the amount of time that folks have to sit at a light, which means more driving time and less sitting time in the car. It's also great if you can to incorporate different driving conditions. So maybe some residential or a a little bit of highway if you can get that in from wherever your event is going to be. And then it's also very, very important to take into account traffic patterns at the time of your event. If it's an event that's between 4 and 7, you're going to hit rush hour traffic depending on where your event is. And so just making sure that your test drive route does take into account those traffic patterns. And then you'll also have to decide before the event how you're going to accept signups or have people sign up for test drives. And there's a number of ways that you can do that. You can do pre-registration for a timed slot. You can do on-site registration with a ticketed system. You can also use an online queue system that notifies attendees via message or text when their test drive time is approaching. So then they can just head over to the test drive area. And next slide, please. Once you have figured that out and you have a registration link, if you want to go that route, you can start really marketing and reaching out to people to let them know that this event is happening. We highly, highly recommend reaching out to your local EV owners to help put on a static display. If any of you have ever talked to an EV owner, the majority of them are over the moon and so, so happy to volunteer their time always to talk about their experience of what it is like to own, charge, maintain an EV. In particular, our Minnesota, there is a Facebook group for the Minnesota EV owners, and it is a fantastic resource. I highly recommend utilizing them. It's as simple as just adding a comment to the group of just, hey, we have this event this time, this day, we're looking for these types of vehicles. Let us know if you're interested in attending, and you will likely be bombarded with very eager volunteers. It's also very important to connect with your dealerships, and so that's where you'll get vehicles, but then also make sure that you're reaching out to utilities and environmental organizations. We have had e-bikes for test drive at some of our events, and that has been a huge hit. And so we recommend doing something like that as well. And then last but not least, don't forget to market your event. So invite your community members and your local VIPs, and your VIPs can be legislators, anyone who in the community that owns a fleet. It could be members of your Chamber of Commerce or your city council, just making sure that you get people who make big decisions kind of at your event is good for advocating and just getting the word out about EVs. And next slide, please. So during the event, I won't go into much detail here. It's fairly self-explanatory of just make sure that everything runs smoothly. Be there, connect with your EV owners and your dealerships to make sure that they have everything that they need. Make sure that the test driving routes are clear. And if you're going to count how many test drives you want to do, make sure that the dealers know how you're doing that. And then next slide. After the event is fairly self-explanatory as well, but just thanking the dealerships for providing vehicles and the owners for attending and volunteers for helping. There is a post survey, so making sure that you're tracking all of that someplace. And then that's really what we've done previously too, is send out a summary to all of the attendees, including statistics from the events, and then also the contact information for any dealership who may have been there. So we let them know how many test drives, what dealers were there, their contact information, what vendors were there, and their contact information, so that people have that moving forward. And next slide, please. We want to make sure that to highlight different ways of making sure that you are offering an equitable event. So making sure that your partnerships are inclusive of your community and your community demographics. And then the way that you are communicating out about the events, making sure that that is in a media that will reach your target audience, whether that's radio or specific publications or a specific community gathering place. Making sure that it's easy to understand and offered in translations if applicable. But then also considerations when citing is making sure that both location and time of your events are accommodating and inclusive to different populations within your community. So maybe offering a couple of different events with different times to make sure that you're getting, people who may work on the weekends or work during the week and can't get there during the week, and that sort of consideration with time and with location, making sure that it is sited at a place where your community members feel comfortable going. Just noting that there may be some discomfort with potentially police stations or houses of worship, and making sure that for your target audience, your location is a safe place for that target audience. Next slide, please. I am now going to dive into just a quick case study of how we have applied this ride and drive checklist in the past. So Right Hennepin Electric Cooperative is one of Drive Electric's members, and we have partnered with them the past couple of years in the fall to put on an event. And so this is the one that we did for them in October of 2022. And the next slide will show the layout of our event. And so we had parking with a big blue square in the middle there. Registration is just to the top of that, so that just right off of the parking lot, people are hitting the registration table. And then off to the left, we had our EV display, so all of our EV owners, and we had a food truck, an ice cream, and a DJ. It was a hip hop in place, and it was really great. And then off to the right, we had our test drive kind of staging area. So those yellow cars are where the chargers are, and then all of our test drive vehicles lined up in that orange box there. And our event booths were to the north of that. And we had people line up. We had people pre-register for a specific time, and then when their time arrived, we had them hop in line, and the line kind of went through the event booth so that they had things to do while they were standing in line. It was a very short line, which was great. And we had just kind of a one line system of you line up one line, and then when you're at the front, you get the choice of whatever vehicles are available for you or are available at that time to just hop in. No waiting around for a specific type of vehicle, just whatever is available, you can pick and hop in and do your test drive. And we did it. It was a very quick 2-minute test drive route we did for this particular event. And I can go into that in a little bit. And so making sure again here that our e-bikes were kind of inside of that test drive route again. So there is no foot traffic crossing the test drive route at any point. Next slide, please. So we did have a couple of test drive options for this particular event. And this was the longer version. So it's about 12 minutes and a 7-minute test drive. And you've got that's Highway 55 kind of going in the middle diagonally there. And so you've got a little bit of highway, you've got some residential areas. And with this one, it kind of depends on the number of vehicles that you can get. And so Moaz will go into this more in detail in just a moment here, but having a number of test drive routes available for you ensures that you're able to give the amount of test drives that you want to. So a longer test drive, you're going to be a little bit more limited in the number of test drives that you can get. A shorter test drive means that you'll get more people in cars. And so that can be like a last minute day of decision of, okay, we have 4 vehicles and we have 80 people registered, so we can go ahead and go with this longer test drive. Or we actually have 3 vehicles and we have 80 people registered, so we're going to go with a shorter test drive and then accept more walk-ins for people who want to maybe drive a second car, or as time is permitting, walk-ins. And then the next slide here will show kind of the route that we ended up taking. And that was due a little bit to vehicle availability, but also due to road construction on some of those other roads during our event. And so we opted to just go with a nice, quick, easy around Right Hennepin's headquarters. And there was still like a chance to accelerate. So up the left here is a nice long road where folks could accelerate and really get the feel of what it's like to accelerate in an EV, which is vastly different than a gas-powered vehicle, and then some hard curves and all of that, so they could really get the feel of the vehicle. And from here, I think I will pass it on to Moaz, and I think we are saving questions for the Q&A session. So I will be on to answer those at the end.
Thank you, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. This is Moazuddin. I'm an EV policy specialist with the Great Plains Institute. I work on the same team with Hannah, that's transportation and fuels. And, Hannah covered the bulk of ride and drives, and that's because she does the bulk of the work too. But the one thing I think you'll all agree with me that it's hard to do a ride and drive event for EVs without the EVs. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about our experience with dealership outreach and getting those electric vehicles to the event. So I'll start, if you please move to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So the thing we start with is just look at the list of automakers who offer electric vehicles, because this is a rapidly evolving market. The number of EVs and the type of EVs keeps growing every few months. And even this list that we've screenshotted here from one of our partners, Shift to Electric, they have this great list that shows all the EVs available on the market, and then the details to going from price to the battery range and the charging speeds and all that sort of information. That's good to keep handy at an event like that, though. When you get a dealership, they usually offer a representative too who's there to answer these questions about vehicles. But I think it's never a bad idea to have a list like this handy when you have a ride and drive event. But we also start the planning with a list like this. Look at the automobiles that are available in electric, and then try to see what models you think your audience would be interested in. For so long, people wanted electric pickup trucks, and that was something you wouldn't find on this list. And now you can find realistically two electric pickup trucks. So when we conduct these events, especially outside the Twin Cities, you know that, okay, you look, there's Ford F-150 Lightning, look for the nearest Ford dealer. And then Rivian, which doesn't have their traditional dealerships, but that's something we'll discuss in the next slide. So the important part is to look at this list, and I think as of December 2022, we had 62 different electric vehicles. So you got plenty of choice there. And then it's also broken down by plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and battery electric vehicles. And in my opinion, you should have a mix of both. At these events, people will walk in who might not be ready to go into a full electric vehicle, but a plug-in hybrid can be just the perfect compromise there. So when you look at this list, you can, because it clearly mentions, plug-ins, plug-in hybrids, and then battery electrics, to try to divide, if not equally, just have some representation of plug-in hybrids. And then, maybe you want a few larger electric vehicles, a few luxury electric vehicles, that really attracts people. And then, of course, some affordable ones, which, you see more and more of those on lists like these. So highly recommend having a look, just noting down the automakers or dealerships that you would be interested in contacting, for these particular models that you think would be a hit with the audience. And then if you go to the next slide, please, comes the part where you start looking for the dealerships that would provide these vehicles. And it's important to note that dealerships also have these service territories, and they don't like to step into the next dealership service territory. They do have these agreements, whether written or not. So the easiest thing to do is look at your event on a map. I use Google Maps here. And then from that event location, try to look at the nearest dealership. So again, if we're looking for an F-150 Lightning, which Ford dealership is the closest one to the location? It's usually a good bet to start with them, let them know this is the location, this is the date, and the kind of time commitment you want from them, they are usually more than willing to share their inventory, send a representative, and give those ride and drives. They get to distribute some business cards, and usually we also recommend this to the attendees, and the dealerships, of course, do make that point that if they want more details on the vehicle, they can always follow up with the dealership. So now they know they're at this event and there's a Ford dealership not so far from there. So that keep that in mind. If you don't find your desired vehicle at the closest dealership, then it's completely okay to move to the next one. And if there's a second or a third Ford dealership, they won't mind knowing, if you make it clear to them that you contacted the closest one and they did not have the vehicle in inventory or were not available. You can always move to the next dealership as long as it's in a reasonable distance and they're able to drive to your event. And Hannah mentioned this. There's always some uncertainty when it comes to these vehicles with dealerships, because you can reach out to a dealership well ahead of the event, and they might be more than willing to share their inventory and kind of help you host these ride and drives. But they're only able to do that if they have inventory on the day of the event, and they're not gonna hold a vehicle for you, not sell it, because they're that's their business model. If someone walks into the dealership the morning of your event and purchases the vehicle, then it's gone, right? So they cannot make that sort of a commitment, and that is why it's what we realized is it's always good to contact more dealerships and try to get more vehicles than you absolutely need, get those reserved for the event. And on the day off, you may find that a dealership has a shipment and they have 4 additional EVs, or they've sold out their whole stock. And the past few years, as you all might have noticed with the pandemic and then the supply chain crunch, dealerships have not had vehicles on the lot. The average time that a vehicle spends on the lot has really gone down. So this can be a bit of a challenge. And Hannah mentioned this, it's why we had these alternate layouts. So, the variables here, which, in the end decide whether or not someone gets to ride in an EV, or, what's first the number of vehicles compared to the number of attendees. So, you need to keep that ratio good. But in case you don't have enough vehicles and it's not like you can stop people who've registered from coming in, then it might be a good idea to just shorten that circuit over there. So we, in the end, as Hannah mentioned, was both due to a shortage of vehicles, but also because there was some construction on the other route. We decided if we come down from 10 minutes to 2 minutes, we're able to do utilize 4 vehicles and give the same kind of experience to the attendees as we would otherwise with maybe 7 or 8 vehicles. So that's something to keep in mind. Other than this, Hannah already mentioned this, the time of year can also matter. So, I mean, this has been a bit unusual what we've had in the past 2 or 3 years, where there's just no inventory on lots, and then the EVs we would even see would just come in for a weekend, and these were EVs that were already booked by customers. So they're paid for them, and then that's the customer's electric vehicle that is just there for delivery, and the dealers could not bring those vehicles. They can only bring vehicles that they own to the event. So that's unusual. But as Hannah mentioned, the National Drive Electric Week, which happens at the end of September, is also a time you might want to either avoid, or if you wanted to conduct an event, then you're advised to reach out to the dealerships way ahead of time. On this next slide, I just wanted to mention that there are also some alternatives to dealerships, which we were able to utilize at the Right Hennepin event that Hannah mentioned. First of all, when it comes to electric vehicles, there's Tesla and Rivian. The new model seems to be going bypassing the dealership. So keep that in mind. If you want an electric vehicle, maybe they don't have a dealership. So you might have to reach out online to a Tesla store or a Rivian store. Other than that, if you know someone who in your department who procures vehicles, there are sometimes these fleet service providers or leasing companies can be very useful. They usually have stock and are sometimes very happy to provide that for an event like this. That's what we did. We had 2 of our vehicles and e-bikes come from a leasing company, which usually is not even on our radar. So we were fortunate enough to be introduced to one of these leasing companies, and they helped kind of cover some of the shortfall there. So I'll stop there. That was our experience with procuring these EVs for an event. And Rebecca, I don't know if you want to do questions now or at the end of the event.
Yes, thank you both to Hannah and Moaz for that wonderful presentation. We will hold questions until the end. I know I saw some coming in on the chat, so stay tuned for that. But next, I will introduce our cine panel. We have Drew Engel. I'm so sorry, Drew. I'm going to let you introduce your last name there. But then we also have Matthias Huey on. Drew is from the city of Minnetonka, and Matthias is from the city of Faribault, and they're here to tell about their experience hosting EV events. So Drew, I think you're up first. Did you have slides that you wanted to share, or?
I do. I will share them right now.
Great, I will stop sharing.
There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Cool, awesome. And yeah, so my name is Drew Ingvelson. It's a difficult Scandinavian name to say, so you're not the first to fail and won't be the last. But yeah, so we had an everything electric event. That's what we did. That was sort of what our focus was on, and I'll give a little bit of background. So we had a new sustainability commission that started the year before. So this was back in 2021. They started, and this was a sort of they worked farmers markets that first year, and they want to do sort of their own event. They want to do something new. So they had heard about ride and drives and were really excited about it. But something they were looking at is they wanted to expand it beyond just vehicles. So they did everything electric, which I'll talk about in just a bit. I think big things that really helped us was we had a Green Corps member at the time. So we had someone who could really focus on this and put a lot of their time and effort into it to make sure it's a positive event. Our public works department too is really important with this. They were able to bring us equipment, vehicle, or different things we had for their tents. So that was really important to have that sort of help from people who run events like this typically. And then our event date was Sunday, July 24th from 2 to 5 p.m. And we did it at our community center parking lot. So going into promotion, yeah, there's a lot of different ways that we were thinking about doing promotion. We did a lot of our sort of standard things. Our Minnetonka memo, which every event I host, I always ask people, it's this letter that goes out to every property in Minnetonka, every residence. And every time I run an event, I ask just anecdotally who heard it from different places. The Minnetonka memo gets like 90% of it. It's the weirdest thing in Minnetonka. We have print is not dead, at least not in Minnetonka. I don't know about other places, but we also had it in our local paper, the Sun Sailor. And then something we did that's a little bit unique for us, we went and put posters at some community sites. So Hennepin County Libraries, Lake Winds, a grocery store, Gopher Ace Hardware, and then also Unmapped Brewing. So those are some places we've partnered with before. So we just added them into our physical promotion. For electronic promotion, we did again our sort of standard things that was already talked about. Social media, we put things on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those. We also have email subscriber lists. So we have lists for various different topics. I think if I'm remembering the number right, it was around like 10 or 12,000 emails that we had for sustainability and city events and things like that. So it was a pretty decent sized list for that. We also post on our city website, which we do for various events. But then sort of something different we did was we used billboards. We have the right to use billboard space for a short amount of time every day. So we use that space to, again, just continue out that outreach. That was a little unique for most of our events. And then, yeah, here's our event site. Is at our community center. So here was we had just lines up of our city sponsored things. People who brought their own vehicle were in yellow. And then we had dealers and then also some other vendors in green. So like someone said, big parking lot, very important, takes up a lot of space and you don't want to be crammed. So that was really good to have that. Something else we did at the event was we had, we were talking about doing a vendor, like a food truck or something, but we weren't sure what our attendance going to be like. So to be economical, we just had some ice cream treats for people and soda. So we kept it sort of low cost. We just gave those away too. I think that was also another positive we had. And I didn't get too many issues from dealers from having sticky steering wheels. Thought that after the fact, maybe ice cream wasn't the best thing for a hot July day. Going into our drives. So we wanted to keep it short, but we also want to have those variety of driving. So here is where we were at the community center. You took out, we did not follow the best advice. We had left-hand turns, but we made it okay. It did make the drives a little longer, but you had to drive along Minnetonka Boulevard. You'd go up and then you actually got to have some highway driving, which we thought was good for a driver to sort of feel like that is. And we recently got an electric vehicle at the city of Minnetonka, and yeah, it's very different for acceleration, much more instantaneous. But so you had a stretch of 494 you had to drive on. You got to go onto the off ramp to get onto Highway 7, and then took down Williston Boulevard. It's a 35-mile-per-hour street, but it's more of a straight shot and without any stops along the way. So that was for our test drive of EV vehicles. But again, we had an everything electric event. So we had other things there, including electric bikes that people weren't able to test ride that day, but we had planned for it. So, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So yeah, our site, we have a trail that goes along Minnetonka Boulevard that people could have rode on and then turned back on. So it's just a 4-mile bike ride that we had planned for. The day of the event, we had 5 dealers that attended. We were originally scheduled to have 3 of them provide test drives. And I say originally provided because some things came up. So again, we had a variety. These were all mostly dealers that are in Minnetonka, a few that are just nearby in Golden Valley and then also Eden Prairie. But of those dealers, we had 3 that had committed to doing a test drive. One of them had a check engine light turn on the day of the event. So that took one of our 3 out. And then another one at the last minute wasn't able to test drive, but they were just able to show it. So we were stuck with 1, but Polestar was able to give test drives, which worked great. And then we also had volunteers. And I think someone mentioned before that volunteers are very enthusiastic about their vehicles, and I can second that. And the really nice thing about the volunteers too is it really gave us a bit more variety of vehicles. I think a lot of the ones that were there for test driving were more high end and more high cost, but the volunteers, we had some people who had some less costly ones like a Chevy Bolt and Nissan Leaf. So I think that was helpful. The one that was really cool was a Mini Cooper. I didn't know they had an EV Mini Cooper, so that was sort of surprising to see. But yeah, that was really helpful to have them. I think people really enjoyed hearing about just anecdotally what people thought about their vehicle, which we're more than happy to share their advice. Our additional vendors that we had there were Tonka Cycle that had some electric bikes, Dick's House of Sport, Go for Ace that had some yard and lawn equipment, and then Pump and Meter that had some electric vehicle charger that they were there for. We also had Xcel Energy and Commuter Services for the I-494 there to talk just about general things about, again, having electric vehicles and also just commuting different ways. And then we had our own city display, which was great to have. So we had EV chargers that were recently put in, but we were held up. They were not operational that day, but we needed to display them. They are operational now. We also had an electric golf cart and some yard equipment that we use for our own facilities. So we had to show a little bit of what the city does on our side and how we're going a bit more electric. We also had an electric vehicle presentation done at our event. Unfortunately, I think just the way it was set up, I think there's something important to think about is how you're going to set that up to have that presentation. People were much more interested with the vehicles and getting a presentation on the day of. So you can maybe think of a better way to do that than we did, because our attendance for that wasn't super great. Speaking of attendance, it was really difficult to guess how many people we had because we didn't have anyone sort of checking in. People could sort of come and go at multiple places. Our conservative guess was about 160. This is probably the low end of what we had there. Might have been as high as 200, but we didn't have any, again, very solid tracking for people. But someone mentioned doing a survey, and we did not do a survey for the people that attended, but we did for the people that were a vendor or attended there as working at the event. And we got some very positive reviews, but also some good reviews to think about for the next event we host. So location, layout, time length, communication, we all have very positive reviews for that. The ones we had sort of mixed reviews on were dealers noted difficulty of working a Sunday event. However, our non-vehicle vendors and our volunteers really liked it being on a weekend. So, and even if you look at our survey, they noted that Sunday was an okay event to have it on. So a little bit of a mixed review from our different people we had there. But I think the nicest quote we had, which I had to put in here because after thinking about all the ways we could have changed this and done it better, someone did say at the end that they thought it was a really great event that they attended, one of the best ones, and they really enjoyed having the variety of items there. So that was something positive that we got at the end of the survey that people provided. And unfortunately, yeah, we did not have any dealers that were willing to filled out the survey. So I might have been busy, not sure. So our note of them not wanting to work on a Sunday or having difficulties on a Sunday was more anecdotal. And a lot of it was related to staffing, just having someone come out on a day that they typically don't work was difficult for them. And then, yeah, so looking for changes for 2023, more postings at local businesses. I think that was a really great partnership and was a good way to get out in our community. Something we're looking at doing more this year. We haven't set a date yet, but it's definitely something we're going to look more at doing and having our commission go out and connect with our local businesses. Day of the week too, something we're going to probably change up. Aim for either a Saturday or another, if we can attach it to another event, or aim for a weekday event. And speaking of different events, it would have been great. This was a standalone event. There wasn't part of anything else. We really would have loved to do it as attached to another event, but timing just didn't work out. I think something we noted was some of our big events that we have in the city. We have an open house and Summerfest. They're just too busy, too many pedestrians. We have sort of a long-standing history of not having vendors there. It's not a place for people to be selling things. So, but something we have looked at doing is our farmers market, which would have worked great before, but now it's moving. We used to have it at our community center, but now we're gonna have it at Ridgedale. So we're gonna have to change up a little bit with what we do with that. Also, what we've done in the past is a solar power hour event, which we thought this would be a really great opportunity to sort of connect those two things, is looking at solar, looking at EVs, connecting those and having those a part of the same event. So this year, here's a bit of our timeline for what we're doing. Someone talked about reaching out to dealers. I can't push enough, talk to them earlier rather than later, and understand they're not going to be committal. I can attest to that. We talked to so many dealers and they said, we can tell you about a week before. Okay, that's hard to plan. So we had a few that did commit to it. So we just went with it, had faith there'd be some inventory, but inventory was an issue last year for several different dealers. So connecting with vendors and then volunteers too. That's what we're gonna be doing in April and May. Here's a picture of someone we had who was just a volunteer who wanted to come and show off their electric lawnmower that can move around the yard. It's a robotic one. So you set up a perimeter, but people were really fascinated about that. I think it was dubbed the yard Roomba as what we called it for the entire day. But yes, and then May, we're going to determine what date we're going to have. We're going to have to do some talking to figure out when that's going to work best and what location. Going to promote the event for 3 months. I think we're going to do a fair amount of promotion. That's going to be a long thing to push. And then hosting it again this year in August or September. So with that, I will hand it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Drew. That was wonderful. And I really liked, I had never considered doing billboard promotion. So I think that was a cool aspect that I haven't seen before. Next, I'll hand off to Matthias.
Yeah, hi, my name is Matthias Huey. I'm with the City of Faribault. I'm the Community Development Coordinator.
I even asked you. I'm so sorry.
I'm
missing out on all the names today. So sorry.
It's totally fine. I've grown up hearing everything. I had one teacher who just insisted on calling me Matthew because he just couldn't figure it out and he gave up. There were 2 other Matthews in my class, so he just didn't help the situation. Drew, I gotta say, I love that everything electric event with the yard equipment. I think that's a fantastic idea, bringing that in. And so I'll talk about our events that we've done here at the City of Faribault. So we've done 2 events in the past, a ride and drive, which we did back in 2019, and then an EV showcase. So these are both a little bit different approaches, but similar takeaways from both. And you can go ahead and do the next slide. I'll give you a little bit background on Faribault. So we're a participant in Cities Charging Ahead. We're in currently our second phase of working with Excel's Partner and Energy Program on an energy action plan. And then Excel Energy had funded a fleet karma study. So we did this and did an analysis of our fleet and looked at where we could save money with electric vehicles. I know that there's hesitation around this just internally and externally. We are an outstate city, so some of the, I guess politically, socially, there's a little bit more hesitation around some of these things in the city, and you know, we're no stranger to getting comments that, you know, I could never give up my you know, gas truck or what have you. So but you know, we've had a lot of success with these events, and I think that, you know, that is changing, and we just keep working at it. And so, you know, we viewed the EV suitability analysis that we did, that fleet karma study, as part of a broader city effort. It tied in with our energy program. And the big thing that moves the needle for us in the outstate is that, you know, we're moving towards sustainability, but it's really about reducing those energy costs and those ownership costs. And that really starts to speak to our constituents here. So go ahead and do the next slide. So the first event we did was the Ride and Drive. That was August 13th, 2019. It was hosted from 3 to 6 p.m. And now this, I know, it seems like a little bit of a weird time because there's not a lot of like that traditional after work time, but this was a Tuesday night, and it was timed specifically to coincide with a city council meeting. So we held it at City Hall. There was a city council meeting scheduled at 6 p.m. And part of the intent was that the city council would be able to attend and would be able to, you know, even test drive electric vehicles or see them. And this was a follow-up to that fleet karma study that we did. So the idea being that, you know, there may be some hesitation about going electric, maybe some hesitancy about that, especially if there's like more of an upfront cost, and then you know, discussions about installing chargers and stuff like that. So this really gave us an opportunity to reach out to those decision makers and connect with them and get them an experience with it to see, you know, what it would look like. We started with a presentation that was a recap. Our city planner, Dave Wanberg, did that. He looked at, he basically did an overview of the fleet karma study from 3 to 6. And then from 5:30 to 6:30, the GPI did a EV 101 presentation. At that event, we were able to get, there were fewer vehicles at that time, but at that event, the plug-in electric Outlander was available. We had a Tesla, a Leaf, and a Chevy Bolt from a local dealership. Next slide. Some of the key things. So we had good attendance, as I mentioned. Light refreshments were provided. One of the key things that we did was partner with local nonprofits. So we have here we have a group called Grows, who does a lot of like gardening and sustainability pollinator work, and they wanted to present. So finding partners like that who could also show up. You know, GPI was there, as well as the typical Ride and Drive booth, and Excel Energy's Partners in Energy. So we did like promotion of home energy squad visits, things like that have been a key initiative in our city as well. After that event, the city did end up purchasing a plug-in Outlander, the hybrid Outlander, and then we purchased a Leaf as well. E-bikes, we didn't have any e-bikes at the time, and since then we've also, Faribault School Bus Company has their private company, not part of the school district, but they did get a grant and got one of those electric school buses. So they're part of that initial thing. And going forward, when we do host another event, our hope would be to get that electric school bus there and to be able to give rides, have people check it out and see what that's like. And yeah, as I mentioned with that, the presentation Drew gave, I think that's a great idea, getting the electric yard equipment there as well. Go ahead and do the next slide. The EV showcase then was just last year in August. It was from 5 to 8 p.m. This was staffed by our Green Corps member from last year. It was held at it coincided with our Blue Collar Festival in Tipitonka Park, which is adjacent to downtown. No test driving available, but we did have 2 Tesla owners show up with their Teslas and were available to answer questions. So it was more just an opportunity for people to check in. It also coincided with, we really promoted home energy squads at that time, home energy squad visits, and I believe even had discounts for people who would sign up at that. You can do the next slide. So as I mentioned, 2 Teslas. GPI helped us identify the drivers and recruit them. They were an amazing resource, and people, they of course love their cars, and we're happy to talk about them, discuss them all night for the whole time that they were there. One of the things that was noticed here was that there were a lot of kids, showed a lot of interest in this, and they love jumping in the cars and pushing the buttons and playing around, etc. So I think if you're planning an event like this, coinciding with a larger community event, be aware of and prepared for that. And I think, next time we do it, we'll be looking for ways to engage kids in different activities and get them excited about energy and figuring out ways to do that. So the location was also excellent. Working with that, we were with the group that puts on the festival. We were right by the entrance, and so it was one of the first things people saw. At this event, we did not bring the city vehicles because the AmeriCorps member is not a city staff. They weren't able to drive the vehicles down there. And we didn't have any city staff available to kind of be on site and answer questions. But that would be something we'll go for in the future as well, is figure out how we can get those vehicles there and have some of the regular drivers talk about them. Next slide. And so that's it. Questions and comments now.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I really liked your comment about, if you are going to be at a larger event where there are kids, to maybe account for that and think about how that shows up. So now we do have our question and answer time. Thank you to both of our speakers and panelists for being on here today. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Lindsay, to kind of lead this Q&A portion.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Rebecca. Thank you to our panelists. We're just going to jump right in because we're getting close to 10 a.m. here. The first question that we had come up in the chat is from Tim Pratt of Brooklyn Park. And they asked, has anyone included e-scooters in an event?
I'll start. We did not. We don't have e-scooters. I don't know if I heard of anyone who had them really available. It's even hard to get e-bikes there for us.
We also did not, but we did last fall have, I think shortly after the event, Bird or Lyft or Lime, one of them came to town. And so, yeah, that's been a more recent discussion, but we did not have them at the event.
And I would echo all of that for, Drive Electric events as well, but noting that more and more electric mobility options are coming online almost daily, weekly. And so just because we haven't yet doesn't mean we can't. And so exploring those options that are coming online is a great way of also getting out the word about electrifying transportation and the benefits that come with that.
All right, thank you. And the next one is directed towards Drew, but I will open it up for anyone to answer. And that's, how did you connect with your volunteer EV drivers?
Yeah, there were some EV groups. I'll have to remember back. Our Green Corps member worked on that. I'll have to double check and see if I can find it. But I know there was a group that she sent that out to and got, I think, 7 responses. Yeah, we had 7 people there, so 7 responses from folks. So it was really good. Let me double check on that and I'll see if I can get back on it.
Yeah, I can add to that. There's the Minnesota EV Owners Group. They're very active, and we know a couple of people in there. So, they have this listserv, and whenever there's an event like this, it's usually, if they're available, and someone usually is, they're more than happy to support these events. And that's the big one. I think there's just also a lot of other Facebook and Reddit, and here and there you got these EV clusters.
All right. And I did drop the link to the Facebook group that Moaz just mentioned in the chat earlier. It looks like you have to ask to join though, so do that if you would like. Our next question, we've already had some of our folks attending answer, but I will open it up for more answers. And that is, does the site have to have installed EV chargers, or are there mobile units that could be brought on the site for this event?
I've been monitoring the chat, and I think that the responses have been great. I think no, I think you don't need on-site chargers. That I think too is a reflection of the expanded range of the vehicles that we're seeing online these days. It's much longer than it has been. It's a longer battery life than we've seen before, and so mobile chargers, if available, work just fine. Yeah.
We did not have on-site chargers at the time. We now do have like a level 2 for the Leaf and the plug-in electric, but we didn't have them at the time.
Yeah, and we didn't have one either at the time of ours, and that was not a concern of the dealers. None of them, they all came fully charged and didn't have a concern about doing that short route that we had.
All right. And then the next question we have from Mike Sagnus from Lake Lillian. What is the cost of your event? Did the city budget for the event in advance?
I can start off. For us, it was a lot of staff time. So I'll say if that's a cost, that was very high. But as for dollars and cents, no, we didn't really have all of our vendors came there. We didn't charge anything for that. We did again buy some food and beverages things, some ice cream treats and some soda, but that was like $250. So no, our budget was very, very small for it. It was not a big budget event for us, at least.
Yeah. Again, staff time involved in coordinating, but the EV showcase event we did was the Green Corps member, and that was predominantly paid for through Green Corps. And then the ride and drive, again, staff time, and we did provide some light refreshments, but nominal cost there, and everybody else showed up as a volunteer.
All right. Well, thank you all for your answers. For our attendees, if you have any other questions pertaining to hosting an EV ride and drive, feel free to reach out to us, and our panelists both had their emails, I believe, so we can share those if that is fine. And I will hand it back to Rebecca for closing remarks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And those are all really great questions. And I will just reiterate, if you have any questions or thoughts about this, don't hesitate to reach out to our GPI group. Just a few next steps for you. We do have this recording, which we will send out in an email along with the slides, but we also will be keeping all of the materials and resources for this program on our EV Smart website, which we'll link in the follow-up email as well, but Lindsay did just put it into the chat as well. Please use this. We're really proud of it. It looks great, and I think it'll be a one-stop shop for you all to find all the information that you would need on all these different various actions that that your community could be doing related to EV readiness. We also have, Hannah was going over the ride and drive toolkit, and we also have a worksheet to help you think through maybe planning some of these events. So we will be linking those both on the website and in the follow-up as well. And our next webinar is on Wednesday, April 26th at the same time, 9 to 10. So with that, thank you all so much for coming. Like I said, don't ever hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have any questions. And once again, a big thank you to our presenters today. Much appreciated.